Hello, writers of Central Oregon. My name is Joshua Savage, and I'm going to talk a little bit about travel writing tonight. I definitely wish this was in person. I prefer the interaction, especially being an instructor or a teacher. We're going to miss out kind of on the questions and answers, and I was looking forward to meeting new people, discussing different things, but hopefully, maybe in the future, we can meet each other and interact. Maybe I'll get a chance to expand on this topic a little more. But more than anything, I hope you learn a little something tonight, maybe get a few tips that will help your own writing. So let's go ahead and begin. What I'm going to do is share my screen. Okay, I've got a PowerPoint presentation here. I think I'll go ahead and turn my video off for right now. It's got my daughter's name there in the corner, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, travel writing with Josh Savage. Okay. Like I said, I wish this was a live setting because I'm all about the interaction and such. But, Zoom's an amazing thing. We've come a long way, I think. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about myself before we begin about the travel writing topic. I'm an educator by trade, as I mentioned. I've taught for, actually next year will be 20 years as a teacher. And I've taught all grade levels from about 5th through college. I've taught social studies, I've taught Spanish, probably more than anything, Spanish. And I've taught writing in English. Okay, I love to travel, as you can see from the pictures. I've been quite a few places. I even like to take my kids and my wife. We have a lot of fun together. Those are probably the most fun kind of trips when all four of us are together. But also I like to take students. Up there in that left-hand corner, you can see I took a good sized group that year. And when I taught at a school called Lausanne, about every year we got the opportunity to take students. And honestly, I believe that students learn more in 2 weeks of traveling than they probably do in a whole semester, just about life and having to do different things and become independent, especially like a Spanish speaking country. When they take Spanish, they have to speak down there and they learn quite a bit. Okay, so how did I end up in Bend? A lot of people ask me that. And as you can tell from the accent, I'm from the South. I'm from the Memphis area, to be exact. Okay, so I say a Tennesseean because we lived right at the corner, the northwest corner of Mississippi, right? So we call ourselves Tennesseeans because my wife and I both worked in Memphis, Tennessee, but then 15 minutes drive home and we were in Mississippi. Okay, and as beautiful as Memphis is, there's not a lot of outdoor stuff to do down there. It's relatively flat. Sometimes we drive to the Ozarks in Arkansas or maybe even to the Smokies past Knoxville, but those were a good drive away. And, we always love to travel. We long for the mountains. We long for something else. So our girls at the time, they were younger. They're still young. They're 9 and 11 right now, but they were even younger. And we said, this is a great time to just travel full time. And so we sold our stuff, just about everything we owned, and we sold our house and we said, hey, let's do this full time. And we traveled. We stayed on the road for quite a while. My wife, she was a travel nurse and she would stay somewhere for 2 or 3 months at a time. And I was able to do some writing. That's when I actually started reaching out to magazines and was able to write about homeschooling and traveling with kids. And I kept blogs and stuff and such. And we just had a blast. It was a lot of fun. We went all around the world, to be honest. And we landed in Bend. She took a nursing position here. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard the same story, or you may even be the story, right? You fall in love with this place when you get here. We decided this is what we're looking for: the mountains and the beauty, It's a good place to raise kids. So we stayed. Here we are, right? And before you know it, I had decided to, well, I had been writing for a while, and we had been using these guides called 100 Things to Do Before You Die. And when we were traveling to other places, like for example in Memphis or in Albuquerque or in somewhere in Texas. Basically, they're nationwide. And when we got to Ben's, basically they didn't have one. I looked around for one, and I guess the publisher, he was like, "Well, you have a writing background." I actually called him. I cold called him and asked him if he was planning on putting one out. And he said, "No, we haven't. We don't know much about Ben. Why don't you write one for me?" And this immediately kind of gave me like anywhere we went and travel, we were always right in the middle of everything, trying to do as much as we can in that short amount of time. And it was the same with Ben. But once he told me to write the book, I mean, we were doing as much as we could, as fast as we could. I volunteered to visit Ben so that I could, get tips from locals and tourists. And basically I did a lot of research, and mostly we just explored as a family, and sometimes by myself and just my wife and I. But yeah, I published this book in late 2019. So it hasn't been out, too long. It's still relatively fresh, and you can find it in different stores around. You might have seen it, different stores and shops around town, right? Okay. All right. So now we're going to jump into the actual topic, which is travel writing. So there's a lot of myths. This is just a quick guide. I wish I could go more in detail and answer questions, like I said, but this is basically, kind of some quick tips, a quick guide if you're interested in travel writing. And first of all, I think you have to understand the myths. And what I mean by that is you have to understand that you're not going to make a fortune from travel writing, right? Now, it's possible, I guess you could, but you're not going to get free hotels all the time. You're not going to get free dinners and all that type of stuff. And not to say you can't do that, but the truth is, number one, there's a lot of travel writers out there, right? And number two, you got to take into mind that, like for me, for example, I have children, right? And as much as we love traveling with them for those 2 or 3 years, it was just it was kind of hard. They were ready to get back in real school, and so you really have to understand that travel writing, how much, and this kind of leads to the next one when I say set goals, but how much of your time do you want to dedicate to travel writing? Do you want to write maybe a blog for yourself or for family and friends to pass down to posterity? Do you want to write for some magazines? Do you want to write for your local newspaper? So there's a lot of different areas, right? And I'm not saying that you can't get free hotels or free food, but if you're one of those people that wants to be like a digital nomad, you're basically giving your life to do that. I mean, it's a blast, I'm sure. Maybe when I was like 20 years old, I would have done that, but not now. Okay, so that's what I mean by kind of understand the myths. Okay, and then, like I said, that leads to set goals. And what type of publication do you want to write for? This also leads to the next one, like know your audience. But how much time do you want to spend writing? Right? Now, no matter what your genre is, whether you're a fiction writer, a travel writer, whether you write to yourself, I know for me, if I set aside maybe at least an hour minimum. For example, when I was writing 100 Things, I would say, you know what? I'm going to write at least an hour to 2 hours a day, minimum. Okay. And I would usually chunk some space in the morning or sometimes in the evening. I try to work around when my kids were going to be in school or when my wife was working, even the weather sometimes. But that type of stuff, you really need to set goals, right? And I mean, the great thing about travel writing for me is basically it's an awesome side hustle. I'm doing what I love to do most. I'm traveling and I'm writing, those two things, and spending time with family. A lot of stuff I write about includes them, right? So it's basically a side hustle. It's not a career necessarily. Like I said, you could probably make it one, but it's not. And when I say know your audience, I'm basically saying that, who are you writing for? Are you writing for yourself? Are you writing for a luxury magazine that stays in the night, that talks about the nicest hotels and the nicest restaurants? Are you doing more of the van life thing where you're living out of a Sprinter van or your Volkswagen van? Are you going domestic trips? Are you going just around Central Oregon? Are you going to other states? Are you going overseas? Which is kind of tough right now, but that's what I mean. I mean, most magazines are geared towards a specific type of traveling, okay? Or even when you're writing for papers or certain blogs or websites and stuff like that, try to keep it with the same kind of idea. These all kind of correspond to each other, right? And what I would say is read the publications before you submit to them, right? I've been guilty myself of kind of just finding a travel magazine and not looking into it much and sending a query. And then, I read a little more into it later and it's just, I probably shouldn't have sent it to them. I could have sent it to somebody more that had more to do with that, right? Okay, develop a peer network. All right. And that's one thing. If you guys are involved with the Writers Guild, I mean, that's your peer network, or at least a start, right? Everybody probably knows each other, or when you meet each other at the speeches or speak with speakers, you might converse online or have some kind of forum set up, so you guys all get to talk, or just even going out. And a network could be publishers, it could be bookstores. You always share ideas that way. You get new places to explore. People might give you other resources and share resources, right? Which is another reason I wish this was a live event, because I feel like we can meet each other and share ideas and such. Okay. Queries, right? So a good query is very, very important, maybe sometimes more important than an article. And I'm going to get a little more, I'm going to expand on that in a little bit, right? Okay, and then of course, writing your piece. Now put query, and like I said, I'll talk about this a little more, but to me, I think it's better to write the query before you write your article, or before you write now it might differ a little bit if you're writing like a fiction novel, or you've got a novel in your mind, or even if you're just practicing and want and have the time to write some articles or some pieces, some travel pieces. But the thing is, I remember it wasn't too long ago, actually, I was talking to this guy, and he was kind of a disgruntled writer. He told me, he said, you know what, I got so frustrated because I sent this article to all these people, or I'd write an article here and I'd send it here, and then I'd write another article and I'd send it to somebody else. And, it got turned down so much. I only had one that was accepted out of all the ones I sent. And I said, but you wrote the article before you sent it, before you sent a query and asked about it? And he said, well, yeah. And to me, that's doing a lot of extra work. Now, if you want to write the article because you have the time, or because you want some practice, or for some other reason, that's great. That's fine. But I would suggest, sending a query first before you go to all the trouble of writing an article. Okay. So speaking of these publishers, right, let's talk about some publishers for a minute, or approaching a publisher. Okay. The first thing you want to do, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Ben Bulletin or some other newspaper, whether it's a travel guide like Lonely Planet, whether it's a airline magazine, you want to do your best to thoroughly read your submission guidelines. Okay. And that's the thing about a query, while I said it's more important, and also it's a lot tougher sometimes, right? Because or I'd say just about every publisher wants something different. They really do. And so you have to kind of change it up here and there. You might have to rewrite some of it. You might have to add something else to send, give more biography. They might even want some of the article itself. There are a couple companies that request the article or the writing beforehand, right? And usually they give you an email address. It'll say submissions@soandso.com or whatever. But if you can't find that, what you really want to do is try to search for the editor's contact. That's the person that you can call, or at least email, right? Okay, so a query letter. I told you I'd expand a little bit on a query letter, right? So the first thing you want to do is make it short and concise, no more than a page at the most. Then you copy and paste that page, and a lot of times you'll just put it in the body of the email. But usually mine range from 3 to 4 paragraphs at the most, right? Next, you want to make sure you leave me out. And what that means is don't tell them all the great things that you can do for their company, or for their magazine, and how much the readers are going to love to read your article. You want to focus more on the story and the destination, kind of tell them what you're going to write about it and why it's interesting, right? Okay, timeliness is important. Okay, I'm going to talk a little more about that when it comes to sending in some information. But you want to try to look ahead, especially right now, because the travel industry is going to be changing a lot. It already has. I don't even know what's going to happen with the airline companies, and with a lot of the parks being closed and just starting to reopen. I know this past Memorial Day weekend, it looked like normal to me. Everybody was out and about, but there are a lot of changes. And so if you can look ahead, and when you approach a publisher and you try to talk to them about that, like, here's what I see, here's why I think this would be a great article. That's really a way I think you can get your foot in the door. And I talked about this before. You just query before you write the article, right? And another thing is, just have someone around your house, whether it's your significant other, whether it's a friend, just have them kind of proofread, not just the article, but the query. There's been a few times where I kind of kicked myself in the head because I saw just a real simple mistake after I sent a query. And I was, I'm just like, well, maybe that's why they didn't call me back, huh? Probably. Okay. All right. And lastly, just cold call if you can. Now, from what I've seen, or at least from my experience, a cold call, like with the 100 things to do before you die, always ends up, how do I put it? I guess you get more responses, because you can send, it's nothing to send 10 queries, right? Let's say, and this goes back to kind of setting a goal. I've told myself, I think last year in 2019, that I was going to send 1 query a week. So 52 queries. And probably I ended up sending more than that. But the truth is, you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 responses per 10, right? But if you cold call, you're liable to get more. People learn more about you. It's a better way to interact. It just seems like it's always been more responsive in that sense. Okay. And now when you query, there's a lot of people out there to query too, right? Okay. For example, okay, magazines. Let's go over magazines first. Okay, let me get a sip of my cerveza really quick. I'm drinking an Apocalypse IPA, perfect for the times, right? Okay, so magazines. Now, this is what I probably write for the most often because I don't know, they're just short and concise articles a lot of the times. You know, sometimes you get features that are several hundred words or maybe even a little bit more. But a lot of times when I write for an article, it's usually like a 200 or 300 word blurb about someplace, you know, a specific destination, like a hidden spot, you know, something like that. With magazines, they have an agenda. I wouldn't say all of them, but most of the ones I've talked to, they set out an agenda for the entire year. You know, it might start in January to December. Some of them might start in spring sometime, but they pretty much know what they're going to publish months in advance, right? So if you call or email and ask for that, chances are, especially if you have contact with them pretty regularly, or if you get your foot in the door, you know, they're going to send you what they want to write about or what they want you to write about, possibly. And you can say, oh, yeah, I've been there, or oh, yeah, I'm going there, or I want to go there. Here's an excuse, right? And that way you can query, you know, at least a few months, maybe even more. An example is I queried about an article. When was it? I think it was probably last August. And the guy was like, well, you know, we pretty much set almost even for next year, but next December, here's what we're going to write about, December 2020. So something that I mentioned in August 2019, he wanted me to write about for the November, December issue of 2020. That's how far, I mean, not all magazines are like that, but that's how far in advance, you know, he wanted it. Okay, so you got a long time to write, a long deadline. Newspapers are the exact opposite in my experience. For example, I might throw one or two queries or one or two ideas, you know, to the editor, and she might say, well, can you have that by next Friday? And then it can go in the, you know, Monday's paper, or can you have it, you know, by Tuesday evening because it's going Wednesday's source, you know, so it's very quick. So that's something else to keep in mind when you're writing for one of these publications. Okay, and then of course there's the guide, right? Like Lonely Planet, or you know, there's several famous ones. The Moon Guide. Now, if you want to write for one of those, this is kind of going back to what I've been saying earlier. I mean, you have to give a significant chunk of your time to them. I mean, chances are they're going to pay for most of your travel. They're going to pay for your lodging and, you know, give you stipends for all that type of stuff, right? And if you want that nomadic lifestyle, then I'd say go for it. You know, if you can do that, I mean, like I said, 20 years ago, I would have loved to do that. But nowadays, you know, not so much. And it's not like you make big bucks for writing these guides. You're a published author and you have a book and everything. But the fame and fortune, you know, it's just for people who genuinely love to travel. That's all I'm going to say. And then, of course, hundreds of thousands of websites and blogs and other places like that. You know, for example, Medium, or a lot of newspapers have digital editions. You know, even like Lonely Planet and such has a digital edition. So I would definitely recommend that. Okay, let me talk about some elements of writing. They told me to keep this around 30 minutes or so, so I don't want to go over too much. Probably lasts a lot longer if we were in person. So some of the elements of writing, or at least travel writing, I think are the same as fiction, in my opinion. You know, because when you're writing an article about traveling, I mean, you want characters, you want possible dialogue. You know what I mean? Like if you can actually, if you meet somebody along the way who really sticks out, whether it's a cook or, you know, somebody that tells you about, or a tourist guide, or somebody that tells you a lot about the area, you know, I mean, if you can insert them into the story and even have a little, you know, a plot, you know, you want to get a story going if you can, tell a story with your writing. And kind of keep the reader's attention. Okay, it's always good to add humor in writing, I think. You want to be insightful, maybe try to pick out some things that most people don't, or at least try to give some really good tips of the area. Okay. And of course, you want to be very vivid and descriptive, right? Okay. Every place, I mean, think about a way to describe it that nobody else does. You know, I mean, kind of going back to the characters and stuff. I mean, a character doesn't necessarily have to be a person, right? It might be the forest itself. It might be a lake that you visited. It might be the trail along the way. Okay. So you want to be as descriptive as you can about those characters. Okay. Make people feel that they're actually there. Just don't make up a bunch of stuff. Add signposts and landmarks. All right. And what I mean by this is, you know, capture those sites that kind of stick out, right? Give other descriptions, and try to avoid cliches so much. You know, you always hear about a hidden gem, right? Or what are some others, like everything is so diverse here, or unique, right? Try to avoid those and use some different words that describe the area. And of course, you want to check your facts. I mean, there's been times where a local, you know, and you know, sometimes when somebody lives somewhere, they automatically think they know everything about the area. So somebody will tell you something and you take it for granted that they're right, but they might not be. So go back and check before you publish a story. Now, if you want to say so-and-so said this, but then I found out, but you definitely want to check the facts. You don't want to have people saying, well, I don't think that's true, you know, which should be obvious, especially with, you know, nonfiction travel writing. Okay, so it is time to write. Now, you don't have to do this right now. You can stop the recording. You can finish watching the recording and possibly do it a little bit later if you want, just whenever you like. But here's my writing prompt for you all. Okay, imagine a destination in vivid detail. Okay, think about the colors, the sounds, the emotions, all that stuff, right? Okay, now when you do that, attempt to capture the place, okay, in your mind. Avoid cliches, like I was saying earlier. Hidden gem, magical, stunning. You know, I mean, every so often it's okay to use those, I think, but you know, try to stay away from, you know, you want to set yourself apart as much as you can. Okay, now what I do is often I refer to pictures. I take a lot of pictures along the way because I love photography, but also because just to capture something that I want to go back and write about. Also, I used to take a lot of journals, and I still do take journals, but sometimes I just make notes on my iPhone. You know, I might be, for example, on a trail and pull over and sit on a rock for a few minutes and just pull out my phone and write a few things down that I want to write about. Some things that just capture my mind, you know, some phrases maybe. And then that helps me go back later on and I'll look at them, kind of jogs my memory, you know, kind of prompts it. So I think that's helpful, right? It's good. And 200 to 300 words. Now, this is what I said about there are so many magazines. Pick up a travel magazine next time you're out, and I guarantee you the majority of it, besides ads, will be short articles about one particular place, right? And they're not really long at all. Count the words. They might be as short as 150, you know, or 200 words, but they pay for that, right? I mean, they pay pretty decent, to be honest, some of them. You know, I mean, I've got a folder of favorites under my Google, and the folder is just full of probably at least 100 magazines or more, right? Not just magazines, I should say. They're also, you know, websites or online travel websites and newspapers and such. But, you know, I just keep a folder and I keep them all in alphabetical order and organize them really well. And a lot of times I even put in a separate folder the ones I've already submitted to and the ones who have, I've actually been able to write articles for. So I think that's helpful. But getting back to our time to write, that's your prompt. I'm going to go ahead and pause here for maybe, 30 seconds so you can write if you want to. I know you can't write in 30 seconds, but you can go ahead and pause it on your side. Okay, go ahead and get started. All right. So like I said, this is basically just a really brief, sorry about that. Brief presentation about travel writing. Hopefully you got a few ideas. You can always, go back to the different slides and pause, which is definitely one advantage of doing this online, But if you want me to answer any questions, if you want to get in touch and talk and ask anything about travel writing or my books or, anything Bend or Central Oregon, or just to say, hey, yeah, please do so. You can email me at ultimatescavenger@yahoo.com. Okay, we've got a Facebook group that's growing pretty quickly, actually. We probably have about 300 people on it right now. It's a group that we share a lot of information about Central Oregon. It's called 100 Things to Do in Bend, Oregon, right? And then soon I'll be putting a Bend newsletter out. I call it Ultimate Scavenger Bend. Like you can see up in the corner, I've got a scavenger hunt book, activity book that's got a lot of trivia and such. But I'm going to be putting out a monthly newsletter here in the next couple of months. So check that out if you get a chance. Okay, and finally, I do have a travel writing class, and it was actually canceled this last semester because everything was canceled, right? And hopefully it'll start back up in fall. But it's basically a 3-week class. We'll be in there from, I'd say, about 2.5 to 3 hours each time for 3 classes. And all of us, other writers and stuff, we're going to sit around and share our resources. I'll give you as many resources as I have. We're going to actually share our own writing. Okay, we'll read each other's writing and discuss that. We talk about approaching publishers in a little more detail and query letters more in detail and, different ways to publish, whether it's online or self-publishing or, just basically approaching publishers like I mentioned. Okay, so sign up for that if you get a chance. Hopefully it'll be available again in fall. And the Ultimate Scavenger is sort of a side business I have. It's it's basically personalized and citywide scavenger hunts. We've done it for 3 years running now. This will be our third one coming up in September. If you want to know more about that, just follow us on Instagram or on Facebook. And finally, you can find some more of my books besides 100 Things. I've written quite a few short stories and a few novels as well. So please check those out if you can. All right. And like I said, I wish I could meet you all, and I hope to one day in the near future. Thank you very much for your time, and everybody take care. Bye-bye.